Thank you so much for taking the time, man. I really appreciate you.
Hey, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so you have gotten into this unconverting people out of the KKK and Nazi groups around America. How did you first get into all that, and how did that start?
Well, first of all, I don't, deconvert them. They deconvert themselves, but I give them reason to rethink the path that they've chosen.
Hmm.
And after conversations, they come to the conclusion, hey, I might be going down the wrong path. Maybe I need to rethink this.
Hmm.
So I am the impetus for them to deconvert themselves. But how I got into it, I'm age 67. And I'm from Chicago originally, but I live in Montgomery County, Maryland, Silver Spring, Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C. And my parents were in the U.S. Foreign Service. So I grew up as an American Embassy kid. I began traveling all around the world at the age of 3 in 1961. And how it works is you get assigned to an American embassy for 2 years in a foreign country. And at the end of the 2 years, you come back home, you're here for a few months, perhaps a year, and then you're reassigned to another foreign country for 2 years. So back and forth were the formative years of my life. And my first introduction to school was overseas. I did kindergarten, first grade, third grade, fifth grade, seventh grade, all in different countries in different schools. And back home, I did the in between grades. But the interesting thing was my classes abroad, my classmates were from all over the world because anybody who had an embassy stationed where we had our American embassy, all of their kids went to the same school. So this little girl sitting next to me might have been from Japan, that kid over here from Nigeria, the one in front of me from Italy, one behind me from Australia. You know, if you opened the door to my classroom, Alex, you would say, my goodness, this looks like a United Nations of little children, because that's exactly what it was. So that being my first introduction to school became what my baseline for school was supposed to be. But every time I'd come home, I would either be in all black schools or black and white schools, meaning the still segregated or the newly integrated. And there was not the diversity in the classroom that I had abroad, right?
Hmm.
So despite the fact that desegregation was passed in 1954 by our U.S. Supreme Court, which is 4 years before I was born in 1958, schools did not integrate overnight. It took years. And even today in 2025, in some parts of our country, we're still struggling with integration. But anyway, so one of those times I came back was 10 years later, 1968. I'm now age 10. And I went to a newly integrated school in 1968. Only two black kids in the entire school. Everybody else was white. Myself in fourth grade, a little black girl in second grade. So, I didn't play with her. She's a second grader. My friends were fourth and fifth graders. So
Hmm.
consequently, they all were white. Several of my male friends were members of the Cub Scouts, and they invited me to join in 1968. So I joined the Cub Scouts. I was the only black scout anywhere in the area. And we had a parade with a bunch of other groups, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Brownies, Cub Scouts, 4-H Club, different organizations. The streets were blocked off. The sidewalks were lined with nothing but white people. I'm the only black person in this parade. People were smiling, waving, and cheering. Everybody's having a good time until we reached a certain point in this route when suddenly, pow, I'm getting hit with bottles and soda pop cans and different debris from the street by just a small group of spectators off to my right, mixed in with the larger crowd. And I turned to see what was, being thrown at me or who was throwing it. And I saw a couple kids over here to my right on the sidewalk, mixed in with the larger crowd, a couple kids and a couple of adults, 4 or 5 people. I did not know them. And, you know, I, I thought, my first thought was, these people over here, they don't like the scouts. That's how naive I was, because I had no precedent for this kind of behavior.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until my scout leaders came running over, these are white people, came running over and covered me with their own bodies and quickly escorted me out of this danger. And now I'm seeing that I'm the only scout getting hit. So why am I getting this special protection? what had I done? I began thinking I had done something. And I kept asking them, why are they doing this? I didn't do anything. Why are they doing this? And all they would do is kind of like shush me and rush me along, tell me to keep moving, everything will be fine. So I kept moving. By the end of the parade, fortunately, the people didn't follow us. But by the end of the parade, I still had no answers. You know, they weren't telling me why this happened. And when I went home, my mother and father were home. They were not at the parade, but they were home. And they were putting Band-Aids on me and getting me cleaned up and asking me, how did you trip and fall down and get all scraped up? I told them I didn't fall down. I told them what had happened. And for the first time in my life, my mother and father sat me down and explained what racism was to me. At the age of 10, I had never heard the word racism. I had no clue what they were talking about. And it made no sense. My 10-year-old brain could not process the idea that someone who had never seen me, never spoken to me, knew nothing about me, would want to hurt me for no other reason than the color of my skin. That made no sense. And my parents were obviously wrong because people don't do things like that. And they assured me that was the case. And I assured them that it wasn't. And to prove that I was right and they were wrong, I pointed out the fact that all my scouts looked the same as the people who were doing this. My friends at school looked the same. My European friends overseas looked the same. So color had nothing to do with it. Well, again, this was 1968. I quickly learned different because in April of that year, April 4th to be precise, Martin Luther King was assassinated. And I remember it very well. Every major city in this country burned to the ground with violence and destruction, all in the name of this new word I had learned called racism. So now I realize my parents, were right. They told me the truth. So I accepted that this racism phenomenon, whatever it is, existed, but I didn't know why. And I formed a question in my mind at that time, at the age of 10, which was, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And so I've been looking for the answer to that question for the next 57 years, because I'm 67 now and I was 10 then. So I, as a teenager and adult, I bought a vast number of books, which I still buy, I still have, a library on Black supremacy, white supremacy, the Ku Klux Klan, the Nazis in Germany, the neo-Nazis over here, anti-Semitism, racism. All my books talk about it, but none of them answer it to a satisfactory, answer for me as to how you can hate me when you don't even know me. And when I would ask people, they would say, oh, Daryl, some people are just like that. That's just the way it is. Well, that's not an answer either. So who better to ask that question of than someone who would go so far as to join an organization that has over 100-year history of practicing hating people? Who ever heard of joining an organization that practices hating people? It exists. And now there are a bunch of them that exist. So I figured somebody like that, could answer my question. So that's how that started. Now, it kind of fell into my lap. I majored in music in college, got my degree in music, and when I graduated, I started playing professionally ever since, 1980. And there came a point where country music had made a resurgence. It used to be, very popular on the top 40, top 10, top 100, whatever. But over time, things changed, different genres appeared, and country kind of fell off the charts. But a movie came out called Urban Cowboy with John Travolta, filmed down, in Texas, and had this mechanical bull and all kinds of stuff. Place called Gillies, and Mickey Gillies' place. And it was a box office smash, and so a lot of country music was in that movie. It was so popular that a lot of the bars and clubs and honky tonks and whatever switched their format from disco and top 40 and whatever else was going on to country music. So I like country music. I joined a country band. If you wanted to work, you had to play what people want to hear. The blues and country, you're a musician, so you know this. The blues and country are kissing cousins. It's the same three chords, right? 1, 4, 5. right? So,
Yeah.
it was very easy to play. I joined a country band, and the country band just happened to be all white. I was the only black guy in it. They were pretty well established here in the Maryland area, and they had played a place in a town called Frederick, Maryland. Frederick sits about an hour and 20 minutes north of Washington, D.C. And there was a bar there called the Silver Dollar Lounge. And the Silver Dollar Lounge had a reputation, which I knew about. I'd never been there. I'd seen it, but I'd never been inside. It had a reputation of not being welcoming to black people. There were no signs, like, whites only, anything like that. But it was an unspoken reputation. And, if you go somewhere where you're not welcome and alcohol is being served, it's not always a good combination,
Yeah.
right? So they'd played there before, and now they're playing there again, and I'm in the band. So, I knew about it. I figured, hey, what the hell? I'll go. So I go, and yeah, I got some looks when I came in, but nobody bothered me that night. And we played our first set. People danced. And on the break, I'm following the band to go sit down, and I felt somebody from behind put their arm across my shoulder. Now, I see the whole band in front of me, and I don't know anybody in this joint. So, I'm turning around thinking, uh-oh, I need to get prepared, to defend myself or something. And it was a white guy, 15, 18, 20 years older than me. Big smile on his face. And he goes, man, I sure love your all's music. I said, thank you, I appreciate that. And I shook his hand. And he pointed at the stage, the bandstand, and said, I've seen this here band before, but I had never seen you. Where'd you come from? And I explained, well, yeah, they've played here before, but this is my first time. I just joined the band. And he says, man, I sure love your piano playing. This is the first time I ever heard a black man play piano like Jerry Lee Lewis. Now, that was, Jerry Lee is a big idol of mine. He's also a friend of mine. And, I was not offended by it, but by the statement, but I was rather taken aback, surprised that given the fact that this guy was a decade and a half to 2 decades older than me, that he did not know the black origin of Jerry Lee's piano style. And I proceeded to explain to him that Jerry Lee and I got it from the same place, from black blues and boogie woogie piano players. That's where that rock and roll rockabilly style came from. Oh, no. I had never heard no black man play like that, except for you. He didn't believe me. So I'm assuming, okay, well, the guy never saw Fats Domino or Little Richard or somebody. Mm-hmm. And I said, look, man, I know Jerry Lee Lewis. He's a good friend of mine. He's told me himself, about who he would see and this, that, and the other. He didn't believe that either. But he was insistent that I come back to his table and let him buy me a drink. I was a fascination for him. And so I went back to his table, and he bought me, I asked for a cranberry juice. He bought it. He paid the waitress, and then he takes his glass and he clinks my glass and cheers me. And then he says, this is the first time I ever sat down and had a drink with a black man, as though he had accomplished some major feat. And yeah, I was baffled by that statement, because by that time in my life, I had sat down with tens of thousands of white people or anybody else and had a meal, a beverage, a conversation, without even thinking about it. And without telling anybody, I sat down with a white guy and had a meal, right? So, I innocently asked him why, as though, why was this the first time? Because I know there are black people in Frederick. I've seen them, right? And he didn't answer me. He stared at the tabletop, and I asked him again, and his buddy elbowed him and said, "Tell him." And now I'm mystified. I'm like, tell me, what's this big secret? And he looks at me and he says, I'm a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And I burst out laughing at him. I just started laughing because it was so ridiculous. I know a lot about the Klan. That's why I mentioned I have this vast library on books on the Klan, and I read them all. And they don't talk about some Klansman coming up and physically embracing a black guy and wanting to hang out and buy him a drink. It doesn't work that way. So, this guy is obviously, jerking me around, making a joke. So I'm laughing. He goes inside his pocket, pulls out his wallet, flips through it, and hands me his Klan membership card. I recognize the red circle with the white cross and blood drop in the center. And I stopped laughing. This thing was for real. It wasn't funny anymore. And now I'm sitting there wondering, what the heck am I doing sitting at a table with a Klansman? But the guy was very, very friendly and very interested in how I learned how to play like that. It just baffled his mind. So, we talked about music and Jerry Lee Lewis and different things and the Klan a little bit. But he gave me his phone number, and he wanted me to call him when I was due to return here with the band, because he wanted to bring his friends, meaning Klansmen and Klanswomen, to see, as he put it to me, the black guy who plays like Jerry Lee. I'm not sure that he called me the black guy to his friends, but that's how he told me. So I'd call him every 6 weeks and say, "Hey man, we're going to be down at the Silver Dollar. Come on," and he'd come. He'd bring Klansmen and Klanswomen, not in robes and hoods, but in street clothes, and they'd gather near the bandstand and watch me play with the band. They'd get out on the dance floor and dance. And on the breaks, I'd make my way over to his table, thank him for coming. I'd meet some of his colleagues. And now two of them didn't want to meet me. They would get up and walk across the room and stand over there, when they saw me coming. So the implied message was, we don't want to shake your hand. We don't want to talk to you. We just want to look at you. Okay, fine. So the others, who would stay there, we'd sit around and talk until the break was over. So that went on until the end of that year. And then I quit the band and went back to playing rock and roll and blues and R&B and whatever else was going on. And a few years later, it dawned on me, Daryl, you blew it. The answer to your question that's been plaguing you since the age of 10, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? It fell right into your lap. Somebody in the Klan would be the person to ask. After all, they joined a group that hates people. Why didn't you ask him back then? Get back in contact with that guy. So I thought I have to have a reason for this. Well, all the books ever written on the Klan were written by white people. Obviously, they have easier access to the Klan without as much fear of retribution or whatever than say, a black person. Now, there have been two books written by black people that dealt with the Klan. One guy wrote about in the 1930s about how he escaped a lynching. The other guy wrote about how he escaped the lynching in the 1940s, but not from being in person, face to face, interviewing the lynchers, right? So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to have face to face, in person, interviewing people who would even think about lynching me. So I decided, okay, I'm going to get back in contact with that guy and get him to hook me up with the Klan leader for the state of Maryland. A state leader is known as a Grand Dragon. A national leader is known as an Imperial Wizard. So I decided I would go around the country. I'll start here in Maryland, where I live, interview some members and the leader, then go up north, go down south, go to the Midwest, go to the West, interview different leaders and members, and write a book, and become the first black author to write a book on the Ku Klux Klan. So that's how that started.
Wow. When you started interviewing these guys, was there kind of like a nervousness behind it? Did you have like a security team, or were you kind of going into it by yourself?
I was not nervous. I was not afraid. I went into it by myself. Sometimes I took my secretary with me. My secretary happened to be white. So, that could present a different problem because, they were not happy to see a black guy with a white woman, even though we were not married, not dating. She worked for me, But I would have her set up the meetings. Now, one of the reasons why I started with I got back in contact with that guy after all those years, and I wanted him to introduce me to the Klan leader in Maryland. He refused. He was fearful for his safety and for my safety. And I persuaded him to give me the guy's phone number and address. He gave it to me on the condition that I not tell this guy where I got his personal information. I said, okay. So, this guy was genuinely concerned about my safety. And the Klan leader's name was Roger Kelly. And he said, Daryl, do not fool with Roger Kelly. He will kill you. Well, that intrigued me even more. I'm like, that's why I need to see him. Why would he kill me just because of my skin color? I need to understand this mentality. So anyway, he warned me again. And then he reminded me not to tell Mr. Kelly where I got this information. I said, all right. So with that knowledge in mind that this guy hated black people that much, I gave my secretary Roger Kelly's phone number, and I asked her to call him. A couple reasons. One, I figured, well, she's white, and I could care less what color anybody is, but it's important to this story that I mentioned that.
Mm-hmm.
One, if I called, he might have picked up in my voice that I'm black, and so I'm not talking to you. Click, and my whole project would have ended before it ever got started. But I knew if Mary called, he would automatically detect that the voice on the other end of the line belonged to a white woman, because she sounded white, if you will. And then I also know the mentality. He would not automatically think that this white woman is working for a black man, especially a black man who's writing a book on the Klan, because they don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So that might increase the odds of him accepting my invitation. So I told her, just tell him that you're working for somebody who's writing a book on the Klan. Would he consent to sitting down and giving your boss an interview? Do not tell him that I'm black. If he asks, don't lie to him, but don't give him reason to ask. All right? So I want to increase, the chances that he would accept. Secondly, if he knew I was black and accepted the invitation to sit down with me and interview, I figured, well, in that interim, he could prepare different answers for a black interviewer than he would give to a white interviewer asking the same question. So I wanted the interview to be spontaneous, candid. So that's why I did that. So Mary called him, and long story short, he agreed to do the interview. Initially, he invited us over to his house, but I had something to do that day, and he didn't ask what color I was. So we changed the time and date of the interview. And I said, listen, let's not go to his house. Let's choose a neutral location. I'd love to go to his house, but for the first time, let's choose a neutral location. So we chose the motel above the Silver Dollar Lounge. The Silver Dollar Lounge was in the Truck Stop Motel in Frederick, in the basement of the motel. So anyway, we chose that motel, and he accepted, and we set the time for a Sunday, like around 5:15 p.m. So Mary and I got there several hours early, because oftentimes when a leader in the Klan is going to go somewhere, they send scouts out first to check out, and then they bring the leader. So we got there, hours early, so that no scouts would be around and word would get back, that I'm black. And so got the room. I gave Mary some money, and I sent her down the hall to get soda pop out of the vending machine. And I put it in the ice bucket, fill it with ice, get it cold. I had no idea what Mr. Kelly was going to do when he showed up and saw me. Would he attack me? Would he say, I'm not talking to you, and walk away? Or would he come in and do the interview as he told Mary on the phone that he would do? I had no idea what he was going to do, but I knew what I was going to do. I was going to be hospitable and offer him a cold beverage like I would offer you or anybody coming to visit me.
Mm-hmm.
So she got that all set, and we sat around and waited. And the room, if you were standing out in the hallway of the motel, Alex, and you're looking into the room, you cannot see who's in the room. You have to enter the room, turn to your right, and go around the corner, and then you see who's in the room. So I took the little lamp table, I took the lamp off, and put the table in the most obscure corner of the room. All right, I put a chair on one side for Mr. Kelly, a chair on the other side for me, and I had a little black bag sitting beside the leg of my chair. In the bag, I had a recorder and some blank cassettes. I set the recorder on the table, all in hopes, A, that he would come in, B, that he would stay, and C, that he would allow me to record the interview. And also in the bag, I had a copy of the Bible, because the Ku Klux Klan claims to be a Christian organization. And they claim that the Bible preaches racial separation. Now, I've read the Bible. I've never seen that in there. So I want to be able to, reach down, pull out my Bible and say, here, Mr. Kelly, please show me chapter and verse where it says blacks and whites must be separate. So I'm all prepared, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right on time. Knock, knock, knock. And Mary hops up and runs around the corner to open the door. I'm seated there at the table. You cannot see me until you come halfway in the room. So she opens the door, and in walks the Nighthawk. Nighthawk in Klan terminology means bodyguard. So a Grand Nighthawk is the bodyguard for the Grand Dragon. Imperial Nighthawk is the bodyguard for the Imperial Wizard. So at this time, Roger Kelly was a Grand Dragon. So this guy was the Grand Nighthawk. This guy comes in. He's wearing military camouflage, got that red circle, white cross, blood drop patch right here. The letters KKK right here. Embroidered on his cap, it said Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And on his hip, he had a holstered semi-automatic handgun. So he comes in, turns the corner, and sees me. He just freezes. Mr. Kelly was on the other side of the corner. He hadn't come around yet. He did not realize that his Nighthawk had stopped short on the other side. So he comes around the corner in a suit and tie and slams into the back of his Nighthawk, knocks the guy forward. And now they both are stumbling around trying to regain their balance and looking all around the room, and I'm just sitting there, looking at them. And I can read their faces. I know what they're thinking. They're thinking, did the desk clerk give us the wrong room number? Or is this an ambush? So I stood up and I went like this to show I had nothing in my hands. And I walked forward. I extended my right hand. And I said, hi, Mr. Kelly, I'm Daryl Davis. He shook my hand. And the Nighthawk shook my hand. I said, please, come on in. Have a seat, have a seat. So Mr. Kelly sat down, and the Nighthawk stood at attention to his right. And before I could sit down, Mr. Kelly said, Mr. Davis, do you have any form of identification? I said, sure. I went in my pocket, pulled out my wallet. I handed him my driver's license. And he said, oh, you live on such and such street in Silver Spring. I'm wondering, why is this man reading my street address? All he has to do is look at my picture, look at my name, look at me, match it, and give me back my license. Is he going to come to my address and burn a cross? I had those thoughts. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to let him know. I wasn't afraid, but it was a little unsettling for him to be calling out my address or my street name. And what I said to him was, I said, yes, Mr. Kelly, that is where I live. And you live at, and I named his street address. And so I was letting him know that you know where I live, I know where you live. Let's confine all this visiting to my motel room, right? And he smiled, nodded his head like he understood. I did not realize that day that I had no reason to be fearful of him coming to my house for any, nefarious purpose. What had happened was he recognized my street because one of his members lived right down the road, right? My street right here, it runs through two neighborhoods. And one of his members lived a couple of neighborhoods over. So Mr. Kelly would have to get on my street in order to get to that neighborhood. And he simply recognized the street name, that's all. It was pure coincidence, but I had no way of knowing that at the time. Today, that same member sits in a federal prison in the state of Maine for committing a hate crime. He's there for a long time. So anyway, we got on with the interview, and every time my recorder would run out of tape, I'd reach down to get a fresh tape out of my bag, or Mr. Kelly would say, Mr. Davis, the Bible says. I'd reach down to get the Bible. Every time I reached down like this, the Nighthawk would reach up like this. And he never pulled his gun, but he'd rest his hand on the butt of the gun. Mm-hmm. And I totally understood that. That's his job. I'm the enemy. I'm the black guy, right? And he has no idea what's in my bag. So he's doing his job to protect himself and his boss. So I got that. So after about maybe 45 minutes of me reaching down, him reaching up, the Nighthawk relaxed. He realized there was no threat in the bag, and he didn't move. I went in and out of the bag. So a little over an hour into this interview, I'm just sitting there talking casually with Mr. Kelly, and out of nowhere, there was a very fast, very short noise, like a, and we all jumped. And I came up out of my seat and hit the table. And the noise was too fast and too short for my ear to discern what it was. So I perceived it to be an ominous, threatening noise. And all I could hear in my head was that guy telling me, Daryl, don't fool with Roger Kelly, he'll kill you. So I'm thinking, okay, why did Mr. Kelly make that noise? I knew he made the noise. How did I know that? Because I didn't make it. So process of elimination. And I'm wondering, what had I done to cause this guy to go off and make some weird noise? And so now at that point, I wasn't afraid, but I feared for my life. I knew I had to do something. And when you fear for your life, you go into what's called survival mode. And in survival mode, you will do anything and everything to preserve your well-being. And there are only a few things, a human being can do. Some human beings say they faint, they pass out because the fear is so great, their brain can't process it and the brain shuts down and they pass out. I don't do that. Other people, their muscles will tighten up and constrict and they'll start shaking and they can't move. They're frozen like this. That's called paralysis by fear. I don't do that either. Another thing people will do is to run away. That is your best option, to separate yourself from the source of the fear. Get away from it. That is the option that I would have chosen. But that was not available to me. How am I going to outrun a bullet in a motel room, right? I'm not armed. The only person that I know who is armed is the bodyguard. I can see his gun. I don't know if Mr. Kelly had a weapon up under his suit and tie or not. All I know is I see a gun on his hip. His job is to protect his boss. Now his boss is making weird noises. So that the only option left is to do a preemptive strike, get them before they get you. So when I flew out of my chair, I was on my way over the table to grab Mr. Kelly, grab the Nighthawk, and slam them down to the ground and take away the Nighthawk's gun. Okay? Because my job is to protect myself and my secretary. His job is to protect himself and his boss. So when I hit the table, I'm looking right into Mr. Kelly's eyes. I didn't say one word. My eyes were speaking to him. They were saying, what did you just do? His eyes were focused on mine. And he didn't say a word, but I could read his eyes. His eyes were saying to me, what did you just do? And the Nighthawk had his hand back on his gun again, looking at both of us like, what did either one of y'all just do? Well, Mary was sitting on top of the dresser to my left because there were no more chairs in the room. And she realized what had happened. And she began explaining it to us when it happened again. The ice in the ice bucket had begun melting and the cans of soda were falling down the ice. That was it. And we all began laughing at how ignorant we all had been. Now, this was a teaching moment. There were a couple of things taught. I won't say that it was a learning moment at that point, but it was a teaching moment. The one thing taught is that we all were human. We all heard something that we didn't recognize, that we were ignorant of, and we all felt fear, right? And then when the fear was addressed and squashed, we all felt relief, and we all began laughing. It's hard enough to picture a black man and a Klan leader sitting in a motel room together, let alone a black man and a Klan leader sitting in a motel room together laughing. All right, that's surreal, but that's what happened. We all were laughing because the fear had been squashed, right? And we laughed at how ignorant we were. Now, we knew there was that bucket of ice and cans of soda over there, but we had long forgotten about it because we were so engrossed in conversation. So the second lesson is this: all because some foreign _ circle the word foreign entity of which we were ignorant, that being the bucket of ice, cans of soda, had entered into our little comfort zone via the noise that it made, we became fearful of each other. All right? Ignorance breeds fear. We didn't know what it was, so we accused each other. Ignorance breeds fear. If you don't check that fear will escalate into hatred because we hate the things that frighten us. If you don't check the hatred will escalate to destruction. We want to destroy the things that we hate. Why? Because they frighten us. But guess what? At the end of the day, they may have been harmless, and we were simply ignorant. So ignorance breeds fear, fear breeds hatred, hatred breeds destruction. Now, in our country, in our society, we spend way too much time, in my opinion, addressing the destruction. Forget the destruction, all right? What's been destroyed is not coming back. The destruction is a symptom, a byproduct of the root cause. So don't address the symptom. Forget about the hatred. The hatred is also a byproduct. Forget about the fear, another symptom, another byproduct. Address the root cause. The root cause is ignorance. If you can cure the ignorance, then there's nothing to fear. With nothing to fear, there's nothing to hate. With nothing to hate, there's nothing to get mad about and destroy. The good thing is there is a cure for ignorance. That cure is called education and exposure. And that's where we need to invest our time, our efforts, our energy, and our money in providing education and exposure to people. So that way their scope of knowledge is not so narrow, it broadens, and that reduces the fear they have of the unknown, right? Mm-hmm. Because we fear the unknown, the things that we're ignorant of. So that's my theory. And so after Mary explained it and we heard it again, we were laughing. We just carried on with the interview, and no more incidents. So I began, traveling around the country, and some Klansmen would talk to me, some would not talk to me, some want to fight me and all kinds of crazy stuff. But I would also go back to all the ones who would talk to me and develop a relationship with them. So I would see Mr. Kelly numerous times, and I would invite him down to my house. He'd come to my house, he'd sit right here on my couch, right? Now, he'd bring his Nighthawk with him, and the Nighthawk would sit on my couch next to him. Sometimes the Nighthawk would get bored, right? And pull out his gun and twirl it on his finger like this while we're talking across the coffee table. So this went on for about a year. The next year, Mr. Kelly was coming to my house by himself, no Nighthawk. He trusted me that much. During those 2 years, he never invited me to his house. Over time, Mr. Kelly became the Imperial Wizard, national leader. At that point, he began inviting me to his house. So I would go to his house. I would see his Klan den where he'd have his meetings. I'd take pictures, and then he would invite me to rallies. I'd go to some of his Klan rallies, take pictures, listen to the speeches, etc. We'd go, we'd have lunch, we'd have dinner, I'd call him if I had to be up in his county, if I had to drop off a CD or a music contract or whatever. So I call, hey man, what are you doing? If he said nothing, I'd say, come take a ride with me. I got to run an errand up there. He said, okay, I'll meet you at the parking ride or whatever. So we'd do that, and then we'd stop by someplace and have lunch. We would take mozzarella sticks out of the same basket. We would use the same salt and pepper shaker, the same ketchup bottle, things that you and I take for granted. He didn't do that. But now he's doing it with the enemy, right? So all of this had to work on his mind over time. Because for a while, when you join the Klan, you are dehumanizing other people, Jewish people, Black people, gay people, Muslim people, anybody who's not you, basically, all right? But now you're sitting in a restaurant, and the person that you're dehumanizing, you're sharing mozzarella sticks with. You're touching the same salt and pepper shakers or ketchup bottle. You're beginning to realize that person is a human being. That person likes the same things you like. You're sharing a meal. You're breaking bread with the enemy, right? Mm-hmm. So all of that had to work and cause some kind of cognitive dissonance. Eventually, it did. But one thing that I did that that I analyze in all my interviews, and I still do it. I still, go to rallies and things of other different Klan groups. Eventually, Mr. Kelly would leave the Klan. He denounced it and got out of it, and he
Wow.
gave me his robe and hood. I own his robe and hood now. Um,
Wow.
and I have a lot of robes and hoods and swastika flags from neo-Nazis and all kinds of stuff, because I've been doing this for about 45 years. But
Mhm.
what I notice is, I've traveled between my childhood with my parents and now as an adult musician. I perform around the world. I've played in all 50 states. I've lectured in different countries, etc. When you combine my childhood travels with my adulthood travels, I've been to 64, 65 countries on 6 continents. I've seen a wide variety of people who don't look like me, who don't speak my language, who don't worship as I do. Maybe they don't even worship at all, right? But regardless of our similarities or our differences, one thing I've concluded is this: no matter how far I've gone from our country, the United States, whether it's right next door to Canada or right next door to Mexico or halfway around the globe, everybody I've encountered is a human being. And every human being on this planet wants these 5 core values in their lives. Everyone wants to be loved. Everyone wants to be respected. We all want to be heard. We all want to be treated fairly and truthfully. And we all want the same things for our family as anybody else would want for their family. And if we can learn to apply those 5 core values or any of those 5 values when we find ourselves in an adversarial situation or in a culture or society in which we are uncomfortable or unfamiliar, I'll guarantee you that your navigation of that situation, that culture, that society will be much more smooth, much more positive, and much more productive. And so I've always carried those values whenever I deal with anybody, whether it's Klansmen or the mailman or whoever, and it works. And eventually, that's what caused Mr. Kelly and so many others to convert themselves to see the light, because it caused a cognitive dissonance. Because they're surrounded in an echo chamber of people who believe similar, right?
Mhm.
And then they discover, well, what we were believing, is not necessarily true. So what do? You struggle with it. It's like when you were a kid, you believed in Santa Claus or something, and then eventually you began to have your doubts. But maybe he does exist. Well, maybe not. It's causing a cognitive dissonance until you find the truth.
Yeah, so I've heard you like mention in other interviews that you kind of lead with this sense of forgiveness. Do you walk into these types of interviews with this forgiveness, or does that kind of happen over time?
Well, I I walk in with the knowledge that somebody has gone down the wrong path.
Hmm.
Now, in some cases, I know their background. They've committed crimes against other human beings for no other reason than the person's religion, the person's color, or whatever. Other times, I don't know their backgrounds other than they belong to a certain group, being the Klan or neo Nazis or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, I don't forgive anybody until they have renounced, that belief, and they have taken accountability for what they've done. Because accountability is very important.
Hmm.
You know, it's one thing to say I was wrong. It's another thing to say I take accountability for it. It was my fault. I own it. And
Hmm.
then take steps towards repairing the damage.
Takes a special person to do that. Were there any interviews that you kind of walked into that did become dangerous or you did fear?
Sure. I mean, I've had my share of physical violence. I've had to hurt people, put them in jail, put them in the hospital for attacking me. Fortunately, those have been few and far between. But
Hmm.
you realize you're going into a situation where people don't like you. They went so far to take a blood oath to join a group that does not like you. You
Hmm.
are a cockroach, and we're going to step on you and crush you. Um, there are people like that out there who simply do not like you. They go around and bomb your church, hang you from a tree, drag you behind a pickup truck. Like down there in Jasper, Texas, the Klan dragged a guy named James Byrd behind a pickup truck to his death a few years back. Um, that mentality does exist. Now, is that mentality prevalent in all members of the Klan? No, no. But you have to be aware that you don't know who has it and who can snap in a second. So I've been very fortunate.
Man, can't even imagine. What are some of the main groups that you're dealing with in today's America?
Okay, well, so when I first started, well, when you deal with any of them, you will get some of the other ones on the fringe.
Hmm.
Okay, so when I first started, you had the KKK, you had neo Nazis, and you had what were called white power skinheads. Today, you got the KKK, the neo Nazis, the white power skinheads. You got the Vanguard, the National Alliance, the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the Patriot Front, the alt right, on and on and on and on and on, right?
Hmm.
All these groups. And let me tell you why this is happening. The media knows about it, but they don't talk about it so much. But you can look it up and research it. Now, I learned this back in 1982. All right. In 1974, I was age 15 and I was in high school. And we had a class called the POTC. It was for seniors, and I was taking it as a sophomore, 10th grader. And POTC stood for Problems of the 20th Century. We had a fantastic teacher, and he would invite different speakers on controversial subjects to come to our class and tell the students, what they believed in. And this, it could be abortion, it could be, whatever it was. On this day in 1974, he invited the head of the American Nazi Party to our class. The American Nazi Party, yeah. Now, see, you could never get away with that today.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
but now,
crazy.
we're talking, well, yeah, you see, you think it's crazy today, but it was the norm back then.
Mm.
And I'll be honest with you, I'm glad. I'm glad that he was able to do that. And I wish we could return to that point in time that we could bring people like that into our classroom. Now, the fear today is, oh, some people might slip through the cracks and be converted into those groups or whatever. But the upside is we can learn more about those groups and find out how to combat them or how to dissolve them.
Hmm.
So I'd rather have the freedom of speech and allow them to come to the classroom. But anyway, besides the point. So the American Nazi Party was formed by a fellow named George Lincoln Rockwell, and it was founded in Arlington, Virginia, right across the Potomac River from Washington, D.C. And Arlington is about 35, 40 minutes from where I'm sitting in Maryland right now. Anyway, George Lincoln Rockwell, he was a vehement proponent of the ideology of Adolf Hitler. And every time Martin Luther King would go somewhere and have a rally, a march, Rockwell and his stormtroopers would confront King. All right. And so anyway, Rockwell got into an argument with one of his own Nazis and a guy named John Poulter. And John Poulter took a gun and killed Rockwell. So Rockwell's right-hand guy was a fellow named Matt Cole, Koehl. And so Matt Cole took over as the commander of the American Nazi Party in Rockwell's place because he was Rockwell's right-hand guy. So Matt Cole and his right-hand guy, a guy named Martin Kerr, Kerr, came to my school that day. And Matt Cole stood in the front of my classroom espousing the views of white supremacy. And he pointed at me and pointed at another black kid in the class and said, "We're going to ship you back to Africa." And then he went like this, "And all you Jews out there are going back to Israel." And I'm 15, right? I'm just sitting there looking at him. I'm wondering, what is this man talking about? And one of my classmates, a girl, she says, "Hey, they live here. What if they don't want to go?" And Matt Cole said, oh, they have no choice. If they do not leave voluntarily, they will be exterminated in the upcoming race war. And that was the first time I ever heard the term race war.
Yeah.
And so later that day, I was standing by my locker, and I was the only one in the hallway. And here comes Matt Cole and Martin Kerr. They'd been there all day talking to other POTC classes. So now they're leaving, and they have to walk by me. So they walked by me, and when they got to me, they paused, and they glared and sneered at me. They didn't say anything, just kind of glared and sneered, and then they started chuckling and went on down the hallway. So that propelled me even more to find out more about these people, right? So, over time, music became my profession. I graduated 2 years later from high school, 76, went right to college, graduated 4 years later, and started playing music. So music became my profession, but trying to improve race relations became my obsession. In 1982, I sought out Matt Cole. I found him, and I confronted him. This is 8 years after he came to my high school. He remembered me. Mm-hmm. And we had a long talk. And he told me a lot of lies. But one thing that he told me that I've been following ever since 1982 has been true. The white supremacists are very concerned about the year 2042. All right? The U.S. Census is taken every decade. And if you look into this, you'll see that it's true. When I'm 67, as I told you, when I was a kid, the Black population in this country was 12%. Native Americans, 1%. Latino Hispanic Americans, 2%. Asian Pacific Islander Americans, 3%. Whites were like 86, 87%. This is happening every decade, okay? It is well predicted in the year 2042, which now is only about, 16 years from now or something. This country, for the first time, will be 50-50. 50% white, 50% non-white. Between 2045 and 2050, it's going to flip. And for the first time in this country, white people will become the minority. All right? Now, there are plenty of white people in this country who don't care. They say, hey, that doesn't bother me. No big deal. That's evolution. That's fine. But there is a certain slice of our white population that does care. And those are the ones that I deal with, right?
Yeah.
And what they tell me is, Daryl, I don't want my grandkids to be brown. They call it the browning of America, or white genocide through miscegenation, through race mixing. And so now we're seeing this proliferation of all these groups saying, come join us, we're going to take back our country, right? Meaning take it back to what it used to be. And so these people are afraid that their identity is being erased. And I know some of these people. I know a lot of these people, actually. But their mentality is, we discovered this country, we built this country, we wrote the Constitution, and now people who don't look like us are coming into our country and squeezing us out of our own country. That's the mentality, and they truly believe that they are patriots, and it's their job to save this country. So they run and join these groups that are going to take our country back. Well, when the group does not act fast enough to take the country back, some of them get antsy. And they say, you know what? If the Klan can't do it, or the alt-right can't do it, or whoever can't do it, I'll do it myself. And they walk into a black church in Charleston, South Carolina, and murder 9 people doing Bible study. They walk into the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh, murder 11 Jewish people. Walk into the Walmart in El Paso, Texas, and murder 23 Hispanic people. The Buffalo grocery store, all these different places. These people are acting on their own. They're called lone wolves. And every time law enforcement shoots and kills one of them or arrests one of them and then goes and searches the property, what do they find? They find a cache of automatic weapons that are being stockpiled for what they call RAHOWA, RAHOWA. RAHOWA is the white supremacist name for the race war. It is the first 2 letters of 3 words, racial holy war, Rahowa. All right. They
Interesting.
also, yeah, they also call it the Boogaloo, not to be confused with the 1960s dance music, the Boogaloo, right? But they call it the Boogaloo. So if you hear those terms, it refers to the race war, and they're looking to take back the country. So the last census taken in this country was in 2020. Right? Like I said, every decade, all you have to do is go to uscensus.gov and you can see, the trend. This is happening. All right.
Hmm.
So today, white people in this country are 59%. Black people are 12.9. So we really haven't grown. So they say 13%. Asian Pacific Islanders are 6%. Native Americans remain at 1%. Latino Hispanic people have more than quadrupled. They're 17 point something percent. So if you take just 12% Black, 17% Latino Hispanic, that by itself is 29% non-white, let alone the other two groups, right? So
Hmm.
you can see this is definitely happening. And like I
Yeah.
said, some people, are not accepting that.
Yeah. One of the things that I find ironic is you mentioned the groups are worried about an identity erased. I've heard you mention the Moors and other
Yeah.
interviews, and to me that really stands out because when you learn about them, they ruled a large part of Europe, if not possibly the world. Have you found where they've actually been in America pre-Columbus, or is there anything that stands out to you about the Moors that has kind of been erased?
It's possible. I have not researched that aspect, but I know that they migrated from North Africa into Europe, okay, into
Hmm.
Italy and Spain, Portugal. All right, those people have. Well, I mean, if you want to go back far enough, everybody, yourself, me, anybody, has African roots. If you go
Hmm.
back far enough, all right. But in more modern times, yeah, if in Italy, Sicilian Italians, which is south of Rome, southern Italy, are a lot darker than the ones in Rome and Venice and Florence, etc. Because the further you get away from the equator, the lighter the skin. All right, closer to the equator, the darker the skin. The Moors, went into Italy, and that's why Sicilian Italians are very dark. They get further away, then they become lighter. Same thing with the Spaniards and the Portuguese.
Yeah, it's one part of history that I find fascinating and continue to look into.
You better look into it pretty quick because the current administration is banning a lot of history, removing things from
Oh wow.
museums,
Yeah.
banning books, etc.
Well, there's the architecture around here from like the mid to late 1800s that they attribute to Moorish inspired, which you kind of find it
Interesting.
interesting where it's like,
Yeah,
why would racist people in the 1800s that fought for the Confederate Army, a few years later be building Moorish architecture? It doesn't make sense. I think it comes from, prior civilization that might be just not spoken about or erased. That's just speculation on my end.
you
I
should look
looked,
into that, man. That's
yeah.
fascinating.
A lot of the architecture has been destroyed, but there's historical plaques that stand, and it says it on there. It's built with Moorish inspiration, and all the pictures and everything look like it. They're like kind of mosque-looking type buildings, and yeah, just something that really stands out to me, especially in this area. One thing I'd ask all my guests before we end it is, what do you think happens to us when we die?
Sure, I believe that there is life after life. I know for a fact there is. I have seen it, and maybe on another maybe we'll do a part two sometime,
Hmm.
and I'll tell you my experiences with that.
Oh wow.
I know for a fact that this is only a phase of our life.
Hmm.
We do transition into other things.
Wow.
I don't know about all of them, but there is another life after this.
Interesting. Well, man, thank you so much for your time. I'd love to talk to you again. Really, really
Alex,
appreciate it.
it's been my pleasure, and we will do it. I appreciate your interest in my work,
Yes,
and I,
sir.
and I would really hope you stay in touch with me and let me know what you find out about that aspect of history with the Moors down in Texas. I know more about the North African part of the Moor history, but I'm telling you, That's the worst thing we can do, is to erase and omit and deny and revise history. History is history. We all have history, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the shameful. And all of those cards need to be turned face up on the table and addressed, not erased, not rewrite, and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
I know Texas has a lot of, Inca and Mayan and other, Indian architecture and things like that. But I was not aware of any more influence there. But that's fascinating, and I'd like to learn more about that.
Yes, sir. Man, I really, really appreciate you. So I'd love to talk to you again. Thank you, sir.
We'll do it. Thank you. Take
Mhm.
good care.